Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Welcome to AAFCA at Sundance, where we will spotlight the creators and stars with films at the prestigious festival. Today, our roundtable will feature the creator and actors for the film Passing, the film adaptation of Nella Larsen's best-selling novel that explores racial passing. Joining us today are Tessa Thompson, Ruth Negra, Rebecca Hall, and Andre Holland. Please welcome AAFCA members. To my left, we have Mercendez Springer in Atlanta. We have Kathia Woods in Philadelphia. We have Carolyn Hinds in Toronto. We have KB in Houston, Sharronda Williams in Atlanta, Cornelius in Atlanta, Rebecca Ford in Chicago, Reggie Pounder in Chicago, Brandon Collins in New York, Jonita Davis in Indiana, and Ronda, Racha, Penrice. And I will let you all know, we could have had twice as many, but we want to try to get everybody in. I'm gonna sign off for now and we'll see you on the other side.
I'm Sharronda Williams, prepare wait. This question is gonna be for Rebecca. First, congratulations for tonight. After reading so many interviews surrounding Passing, it seems like you've been on a very long journey, both writing and directing this film. And I wanted to ask you, how has working on this project really affected you in a personal, but also a professional way?
I mean, the answer to that question is sort of enormous. It's sort of like we're talking about a period of 13 years and, you know, and all of the growth and life that is, but this is also parallel to that time for me, and has been a huge part of my life for, 13 years. So I've grown and changed enormously, because when I first wrote a draft of the screenplay, I didn't know what I was doing with it. I was like, I certainly wasn't ready to make it. And I certainly didn't know how I felt in relation to it to be clear, when I first read the book, it was the first time that I had any context for this thing that had happened in my family history. Like, it was never referred to as passing. It was never talked about in those terms. I got small bits of information that were confused and necessarily hidden, and maybe he's this, maybe he was that, we don't know. I never knew my grandfather, sadly. And when I read this book, I had a historical context for this thing. I understood that there is a broader understanding of this practice, of this situation. And I was also able to contextualize it in the sense that I was like, oh, that's what was going on. And then I looked into it further and I was like, well, his parents were probably white passing too. So this legacy this legacy of passing, is one of what's the word I'm looking for? It's sort of inconclusive and gets passed down generation to generation, and you end up with me. And I'm like, well, I need to find a way to talk about this for me personally and also for my family, and I need to find a way into this, and this was part of it.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Cornelius here from Upfront Inside the Entertainment Industry. Congratulations, Rebecca, on an amazing film, and to the actors, you guys did an amazing job as well. This question is for Rebecca. What was the inspiration behind shooting the film in black and white? I totally love that.
Well, there are a ton of reasons, but mostly it occurred to me that the most interesting way to make a movie about colorism was to take the color out of it and make it an abstraction, because I think then you're in a conceptual space where these categories become metaphorical, but also important, which is, in the same way that you watch a black and white movie and your eye makes a process of translation. We know that the world isn't black and white, but we exist it. Similarly, oddly, when we look at race, we funnel people into these categories, and nobody's actually black and white, and film isn't actually black and white, it's gray. So the metaphor sort of kind of keeps compounding in on itself and becomes, I think, a much more interesting space for it. I also thought that there was something, it was incredibly important to me. There's a history of these movies in Hollywood, small, but a history of them. And they're nearly always white actors cast in the roles of the people who are passing. It felt to me incredibly important, not just to have, obviously to cast Black women, but also to cast women who were correct for the roles and not necessarily because they were capable of passing. And there is a certain, there is a certain amount of, because there's an abstraction in black and white and grayscale and skin tone, you can, with light and shadow and play, make things shift in a way that heightens the performative nature of all this stuff. Like, in a sense, I wanted the film to be passing too. I wanted the film to be performative and the film to have a kind of look. So that explains the black and white also. I always think of that scene at the beginning that, I think Ruth looks fantastic with the blonde wig and there's a whole transformation there. But I think there's this moment in the hotel room, when they're sat there and the white man enters the room. And up until that point, I always feel like a 2021 audience is looking at this film and they're looking at Tessa Thompson and they're like, well, I know her to be a Black woman. There's no ambiguity about that. I know her to be a Black woman. But in that moment, when the white man walks into the room, he, in a sense, has the power in this society, in this racist society, to dictate what he wants to see. And so from his perspective, he sees what he wants to see. He's like, she's a white woman because she's sitting there with my wife. Why would it be other? It's context. And for me, in black and white, I think that point is driven home. In color, I think it sort of makes him look a bit like, what's he looking at? Or, and I always found that to be more interesting, actually, with Tessa than, with someone that could be more obviously white passing. So the black and white is many reasons. And the final reason for it is, since I'm just going to keep rolling, my sort of love of cinema goes back to old Hollywood and sort of black and white movies that had often female-centric stories and narratives. And for me, I was like, well, this is the film that didn't get to be then. So let's honor that by making it now. But I didn't want it to be nostalgic. I didn't want it to look like a museum piece. And that came with use of sound and composition and all these other things. But, there was a part of me that was like drawing on my cinematic influences as well.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Ford. I'm from WCPT, Progressive Talk Radio in Chicago, and the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. And I guess I open this to any of you for whom this particularly resonated. But when I was looking at the movie, I was thinking, wow, melodrama. I haven't seen an intentional melodrama like this in a long time. And so in the confusing times we live in now, perhaps melodrama is very direct with its message. And so can any of you really sort of talk about why that has particular resonance for you and how you dug into that particular genre in preparing for this movie?
I feel like I shouldn't speak because I just answered the last one, but my answer is very short. So I'll just my answer is just simply that I didn't, if I went into it thinking of it as melodrama, I think that it would have sort of warped my understanding of it. I think we had to just play the truth of it, or play the feeling of it, the emotion of it, and the tone of it. There are aspects of it that are that, but I think even at the time, the book subverts certain tropes of melodrama, and there's many. There are a lot of layered interpretations about this. There's aspects of the thematically that are more about subtextual sexuality, gender, class. It's it's quite indirect. And I think of melodrama as being, I'm going to declaim something and that is what it is. And I don't think of this as being that at all. So I don't know.
Hi, it's Ronda. I actually have a question for Ruth. I wanted to know, how did being in Loving impact, or did it impact how you played Claire? Was it helpful?
That's interesting. I actually think they're, I don't know, quite starkly different. Claire, for me, what attracted me to Claire, and this is not in opposition to Mildred at all, was her irrepressibility, really, in the face of the choice that she made to pass. And in making that choice, what does it erase? How does it derail your life? How does it affect your sense of self? How unmooring that is, how untethering it is to feel so isolated and alone, bearing this dreadful secret. And the longing that inspires to go home and to belong. And also what her sort of re-engaging with the community that she left, what is the ripple effect of that? And we see that quite clearly with her relationship with Irene. But what made me thrilled with Claire really was that she refuses to let that choice rob her of joy and an appetite for life. And you know, when you historically look at the tragic mulatto narrative, you always feel that they are tragic, but Claire doesn't feel tragic. You know, the circumstances are tragic, but she herself isn't. You know, her capacity for engagement with life is extraordinary. And her persistence in that, despite this strictures of this construct called race that she has tried to elude successfully and quite recklessly in many ways. But what that also has cost her, because there's definitely an undertone of melancholy in her, you know? She's striving to belong and striving to find the goodness in life, but yet at what risk, you know? It's dangerous. But then she in herself is dangerous. What she represents to both communities is quite dangerous, I feel. And that's a very potent sort of energy, I think, in our film.
Thank you. That was an amazing answer.
Oh, thank you.
Kathia Woods, Cup of Social. My question is for you, Tessa. As Latinos, we don't have that narrative that America does when it comes to race. Because in America, if you have one drop of blood, you are Black. Whereas in Latin America, there is a section to be biracial, to claim both. Talk about what that is like a little bit, to have the freedom to be able to claim all of who you are, not just the parts that society deems on you.
Well, thanks for that. I suppose I've thought about it, but not sort of crystallized it as clearly as you did in the question. I'm not sure I can do the same in the answer, but I'll try. You know, my mother, her father was from Mexico, and very clearly a Mexican man who came to this country and was very dead set on trying to assimilate. He was a performer. And my mother, I guess for all intents and purposes, is sort of white passing, but I think in the same way that Irene talks about how stupid white people are in Nella Larsen's book, only because I think people might refuse to see my mom as a woman of color, which she so clearly is. And then my paternal grandmother immigrated to the States from Panama and was very much a Black woman, but also her first language was Spanish, and she was Afro-Latina. And I think when she came to this country, she was treated and looked at as a Black woman, and very much sort of embraced that identity, but also had to then divorce herself in an effort to also assimilate from the culture that really, was so dear to her. And I think that's the tricky and mired thing about race. And I certainly feel, as someone that is, mixed race, when I was younger, I had issues really contending with sort of what that meant. And I think I feel like because of the legacy of racism, but more specifically slavery in our country, I feel like I feel so tied to Black identity. And I think in doing this piece, it was a chance to lean in again and really contend with so many sort of questions and complications I have around colorism. I think particularly in this industry where we know that is still so much at play. That's something that I think about a lot. And certainly when I started working, I didn't necessarily think about the implications of my light skin inside of narratives. And I think it's something that I'm way more conscientious about and have more sort of understanding about. But it's something I'm still trying to, unpack. And while our film, I think, touches on something that's sort of, layered, not specifically just about race, about the ways in which we can get boxed into spaces inside of our identity where we can't actually be the fullest expression of who we are. To me, that's what this book and our film is about. It's about the ways in which so many things, not just race, can be performative. But I'm really curious to continue to really have robust conversations around colorism and identity inside this industry. And I think now I'm finally going to answer your question in terms of my Afro-Latina identity. I think I just want to see more representation across the board, and that we can normalize folks that have, mixed heritage, and folks whose parents and grandparents came from all sorts of places and then came to this country trying to contend with the American dream while holding on to what they feel is most essentially important to them. And I just feel like we still don't see that enough. We sort of get boxed into spaces, and I hope that we can continue to push that and let everybody be seen for their complicated and varied, humanity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Mercedes here with She Critiques out of Atlanta. My question is for Rebecca. I love that the film touched on the fact that passing isn't just getting away with fair skin, it's mannerisms, it's language, and for Claire, it was a lifestyle. Can you talk about passing being a throwback term? What does passing look like in modern day, in society today?
The word has power and meaning across the board in many different communities, including the trans community, and there's many. It's come to mean a lot of things. I don't know that I can entirely answer that question. I know personally, I think it in relation to the movie, which I think is what makes it quite modern as a book, and also hopefully the film, is that I think it comes to mean a lot of the different ways in which your interiority or your image of yourself doesn't match up with how you project, or vice versa. Or I think Nella Larsen presents quite a binary world where everything is black, white, straight, gay, male, female. And I think that in that binary, the restrictions become sort of apparent. And you sort of start to understand that we live in a sort of more complex space. And necessarily, and it kind of can reveal the gap between what we think we believe in and what we actually want. And I think that's really what Passing gets to, the film and the book, and that sort of struggle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Hi, Carolyn. First, here's what happened. So my question is for Andre. So your character, Brian, is married to Tessa's character, Rini, and they have this kind of acrimonious relationship at times where they seem loving, but then once the topic of race comes up, you can see this separation between their ideals of what race is and what their relationship is with regards to their children. So I wanted to ask you, how did you guys structure those scenes with regards to performance so that it didn't come across as aggressive, more as just a difference of opinion?
Thank you for the question, Carolyn. I think, and Rebecca, you should say something about this too. I think for me, it was just in the writing. I think at the heart of their relationship is a real love and a concern and a care for one another. And I think that as actors, you know, Tessa and I attached ourselves to that and to a desire to see things work out. That's what I felt about it. You know, I didn't really feel, I wasn't really concerned about it coming across as too aggressive. I think they're both passionate about their points of view, which is one of the things that I imagine brought them together in the first place. But again, for me, it just came down to the writing. It was on the page, and I think that's down to Rebecca and to Ms. Larson.
KB here with the Color Grade podcast. My question is for Tessa. So we see so much behind Irene's eyes that isn't always said. So what does Irene learn from, and how is she fundamentally changed by this reintroduction to Claire during this pivotal time in her life?
KB, thank you for the question, and also I just love your backdrop. I love you hanging out with Irene and Claire.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. I appreciate you saying that, because, you know, in reading Nella Larson's book, Irene is really a character that lives so squarely in her head, and so many thoughts does she have. And so the challenge of trying to communicate those thoughts where there is no language, and Rebecca did such an incredible job at pulling things and putting them on the page, but it's also inherent in the character that there's a world of things that she's feeling and thinking and suspecting and hoping for and raging against that she never articulates, and that presented a challenge. And so I hope that some of that is communicated somehow, even ephemerally, through my eyes. That was certainly the hope in the performance. I think it's just really a joy to play with these actors. You know, Ruth was talking about it earlier. No performance is created in a bubble. And one of the things that I think is imperative in playing Irene is that she has this unshakable fascination. You know, Larson talks about it in the book, that she cannot say no to Claire. She's just so taken by her. She feels so many things for her. And Ruth made that so easy, because, you know, obviously she's created a character that's very separate from her. And also you don't want to say no to Ruth either. She comes into a space and you just want to give her anything that she wants, because she is delightful and lovely and lovable. And complicated and fascinating and a force as a person. And she brings all that to the character. And so that was really easy. And then getting to play with Andre, who's an actor that I just admire so much. And, you know, we made Selma together, but didn't have an awful lot to do together. And once or twice, I think we read like Shakespeare scenes, because we're both nerds and love the theater. And he just is such a gifted actor, and the kind of actor that just makes everybody better when they're next to him. And so the chance to spar with him in those scenes, I think, you know, to your point, Carolyn, I think there was also love communicated, because I think we were in love with the process of getting to spar and push each other in that way. So you know, anything that I feel like I was able to capture, I didn't do certainly alone, and not without Rebecca either.
Thank you so much.
Hi guys, this is Reggie Ponder, the real critic out of Chicago. And my question is for you, Andre, is that this film has a lot of meaning outside of the film, outside of what was happening. How do you think, since race is a social construct, has it evolved to either empower Blacks to be Black or to break away from its constraints as it relates to this film?
Make sure I understand you, Reggie. So how has race evolved to? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So how has the issue of passing is that people are, saying, hey, I'm being something that I'm not. How do you think maybe that whole phenomenon has evolved to either empower Blacks to be Black or to break away from the constraints?
Oh, I see what you mean. It's a good question. I think I'll speak for myself personally, man. I think that one of the questions about passing for me that I think are interesting is how honest we are willing to be with ourselves about our own just human mess, I think. And it seems to me that we've arrived at a place where perhaps finally we are in this, as you said earlier, Tessa, this Renaissance moment where we are being given a space or claiming a space where we can be more fully ourselves. I look at my father, for example, in the way that I grew up watching him interact with people at work or with his friends or whatnot. And I can sense and see him sitting on himself in a way at times, And I saw the same thing in my grandparents when I was coming along. And I think now, we talk about the evolution of this idea of passing. I think we have arrived at a place where I think it's incumbent upon me, for one, to be more honest with myself, to be more front-footed, to be more vocal, to be more active, to be more fully human, because it's on those people's shoulders that I stand. So I think that the movie offers us a way to talk about that and to look at that. And I certainly hope that my life can, continue to push that conversation forward in terms of living more fully.
Well, thank you. What a thoughtful and powerful answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
Hi, everyone. Brandon Collison, Media and Popcorn Podcast. My question is for Ruth. I was wondering, how did the novel influence your portrayal of Claire?
How did the novel influence my portrayal of Claire? That's so interesting. What I loved from the novel is the descriptions of Claire of being, I had this idea that she was fully and wholly in her body and in herself. There was no bit of her physically that didn't inhabit herself, if that makes sense. And I felt like there was no, even though she does wear many masks, I felt like when she walks into a room, the air changes, and you get that sense of that from in the novel. She's, as a child, always willing to stand up for herself, would never back down. This almost a sort of feral quality, which I think comes from being a survivor and being placed in situations where you must fend for yourself. And I try to carry that through, throughout filming. And this idea that how do I say it? The idea that when she looked at you, and I wanted, like, Irene to feel like, and Tessa to feel like she could see the whole of her. Do you know what I mean? Like, that when, and you see this in the film, like, and Rebecca has spoken about it, is the gaze is so important. And there is this sort of invisible thread that binds Claire to Irene. It's this sort of, I wanted to get the feeling of this sort of heady intoxication that happens when she's around Irene, because it really did feel like, from the book and also from Rebecca's beautiful screenplay, that it's sort of like first love. it's like she's meeting her first love again, you know, and that there's a sort of sense that you get the sense that, you know, Claire's sort of beguiled by this woman and attracted to her, and sort of feels like she completes her in a way. You know, Irene has something which Claire feels she's missing, I think. And I think for me, that was in the physicality of her, and what I wanted to bring to her is that, you know, when she looks at Irene, she lights up. And I think you get that's very much present in Nella Larson's book. You know, it's essentially a love story.
Hi, I am Jonita Davis with the Black Cape. I love the movie, and I want to ask Rebecca, this movie, what the setting is kind of, you know, it's way back when, but the theme is so timely. What is something that you want the audience to take away from this film when they leave?
You know, I've only got the Nella Larson answer to this, which is one that is sort of willfully ambiguous and not exactly. But I just think that it has the potential to mean so many different things for so many different people, depending on where you come from, what you identify as, what you know, all these, it has the potential to mean so much. It can, you know, be about marital unrest. It can be about how to raise your children. It can be about repressed homosexuality. It can be about, you know, internalized self-hatred that comes from all sorts of things. It can be about denial, about like really like being so constrained that you can't breathe. And I think its strength and its power is that it will mean one more of these things according to your relationship with it, and that'll mean discussion. So that's, if I want anything from that, it's that. I want people to have those discussions, and I want people to be like getting into it.
Rebecca, Andre, Ruth, and Tessa, thank you for participating and speaking with us this evening. On behalf of the world's largest group of African-American Black film critics, we thank you for watching tonight. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.